कुंज बिहारी। जयो राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। जयो गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी। जयो गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी। यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजना। यमुना तीरा वनचारी। जयो राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे रामा राम राम हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य स्तोत्रस्य श्री श्रीमद् हिज डिवाइन ग्रेस अभय चरणारविंद भक्ति वेदांता स्वामी श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य स्तोत्रस्य श्री श्रीमद् हिज डिवाइन ग्रेस भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती ठाकुर की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। श्री श्री किशोर किशोरी की जय। श्री श्री जगन्नाथ बलदेव सुभद्रा महारानी की जय। श्री श्री गौर निताय की जय। समवेत भक्त वृंद की जय। All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. नारायणं नमस्कृत्यं नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तमा श्लोके भक्तिर्भवती नैष्टिकी। Read from Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 58th chapter, verse number 50, 51 and verse number 52 as well. Please chant responsively. दासधेनु सहस्राणि परिबर्हम् अदात् विभु युयात् युवतीनां त्रिसहस्रम् निष्काग्रीवसुवाससम् नवनागसहस्राणि नानागाच्छत गुणान् रथान् रथाच्चत गुणान् अश्वान् अश्वाच्छट गुणान् नरान् दासधेनुसहस्राणि परिबर्हम् अदात् विभु युयात् युवातीनां त्रिसहस्रम् निष्काग्रीवसुवाससम् दासधेनुसहस्राणि परिबर्हम् अदात् विभु युवतीनां त्रिसहस्रम् निष्काग्रीवसुवाससम् दासधेनुसहस्राणि परिबर्हम् अदात् विभु युवतीनां त्रिसहस्रम् निष्काग्रीवसुवाससम् word to word meaning dasa 10 dhenu of cows sahasrani thousands paribarham wedding gift adat gave vibhu the powerful king Nagnajit yuvatinam of young women trisahasram 3000 nishka golden ornaments griva of whose necks su excellent vasisam whose dress. This will be verse 50. So that's what we chanted. Translation by the disciples of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation: as the dowry, powerful King Nagnajit gave 10,000 cows, 3,000 young maidservants wearing golden ornaments on their necks and bedecked in fine clothing, 9,000 elephants, 100 times as many chariots as elephants, 100 times as many horses as chariots, and 100 times as many manservants as horses. Text number 52. Dampati ratham aropya Mahatya senaya vritau sneha praklina hridayo yapayam asa koshala. Translation: the king of Koshala, his heart melting with affection, had the bride and groom seated on their chariot, and then he sent them on their way surrounded by a great army. Om Ajnana-तिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपपदां मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगना रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनासहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सहगना ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्णा करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धु जगत्पते गोपेशा गोपिका कान्ता राधा कान्ता नमस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी श्री राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरोभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभय एव च पतितनां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः अनंत कोटि वैष्णव की जय Hare Krishna, thank you so much for being present in this morning's Srimad Bhagavatam discussion. As we are discussing in this chapter that how Krishna subdued the seven bulls and he's marrying the daughter of King Nagnajit Satya or Nagnajiti, Princess Nagnajiti, and as Krishna is going to Dwarka with Satya's father King Nagnajit is giving lots of dowry, and the calculation. Uh, so these verses are mentioning the the dowry, and multiplication of one another. Uh, but last time, if we see the numbers, it would be 10,000 cows, 9,000 elephants, 900,000 chariots, 90 million female maid servants, and I think 90, 90 billion male servants. That's a lot. So that was from one source, but it seems that Bhagavatam BBT is different, but the multiplication factor is same. But anyway, the dowry is huge, and there is a mention of dowry in lot of uh, Puran stories, and I there was this compilation of how Prabhupada is mentioning where does dowry fit in Vedic traditions. So in Srimad Bhagavatam, fourth canto, third chapter, ninth verse, it's all these are from the our quotes of Prabhupada. Says that according to Vedic system, a daughter is given a sufficient dowry at the time of her marriage, and therefore Sati was also given dowry by her father, and ornaments were included. It is also the custom that husband gives some ornaments, but here it is particularly mentioned that her husband, being materially almost nothing, could not do so. Therefore, she wanted to decorate herself by the ornaments given by her father. In Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 22nd chapter, 16th verse, it's about Kardam Muni marrying Devahuti. Kardam Muni wanted to marry Devahuti in the recognized manner of marriage prescribed in the scriptures. As stated in the Vedic scriptures, the first class process is to call the bridegroom to the home of the bride and hand her to him in charity with a dowry of necessary ornaments, gold, furniture, and other household paraphernalia. The dowry is a gift given to daughter by the father to show goodwill, and it is compulsory. In rare cases where the father is completely unable to give a dowry, it is enjoined that he must give a little fruit and a flower. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, God can also be pleased even by a fruit and a flower. When there is financial inability and no question of accumulating a dowry by another means, one can give a fruit and a flower for the satisfaction of bridegroom. The mention of Draupadi here, because when Draupadi got married to the five Pandavas, they were still in exile. So when Draupadi preferred to select her own husband, princes and kings were invited from all the countries. She was married to the Pandavas while they were in exile. But when they went back home, Maharaj Drupad gave them immense wealth as a dowry. Now it's mention of Akrura's marriage, Krishna's messenger. Akrura attained success in devotional service to the Lord by the single process of offering prayers. He was the husband of Sutani, daughter of Ahuka. He supported Arjuna when Arjuna took forcibly Subhadra away by the will of Krishna. Both Krishna and Akrura went to see Arjuna after his successful kidnapping of Subhadra. Both of them presented dowry to Arjuna after this incident. And then there is mention of Krishna book also. Mm. So, yes, I think this will be relevant. Uh, 10th canto, verse 10th canto. The system of giving dowry to one's daughter has been existed in Vedic civilization for a very long time. Even today, following the same system, a father who has money will give his daughter an opulent dowry. A daughter would never inherit the property of her father, and therefore, an affectionate father during the marriage of his daughter would give her as much as possible. And one of the BBT purports I read Prabhupada was mentioning that this dowry, even the husband doesn't have any right to this dowry, and even the sons of the bride, future, don't also have any right to this wealth. Only after the mother, presently the bride, passes away in her old age, then this money is given to the daughter and it's equally divided among the daughters. And this system of dowry is mentioned in Manu Samhita, and Manu Samhita is the religious law book. Prabhupada describes in Srimad Bhagavatam as religion as the laws of God. Bhagavatu Sakshat Bhagavad Praninam. The verse is, what is? Dharmantu Sakshat Bhagavad Praninam. So, and Manu has been described as one of the 12 Mahajans, who perfectly know what religion is. And in Manu Samhita, the law book for mankind, it's the mention of dowry is there. Now, how does that relate to our present times? So in ISKCON communication, I think late 1990s, I think the journal was from 98, and there was this scholar, Jen Brzezinski, may have been an initiated devotee. I am not aware of that, but he discusses, Prabhupada's view of Manu Samhita, Western civilization, Vedic tradition, and how are they aligned. So this is a new topic for me, so we may have discussion on this as well. So Mr. Jen Brzezinski mentions that Prabhupada saw that, for this mankind to strive towards Krishna, the most efficient way would be Varnashrama Dharma. And what was Varnashrama Dharma? What Prabhupada gave the definition was, and it was in line with Gandhian lines. And Prabhupada, had some influence of the ideas of Mahatma Gandhi. So, it was a pre-industrial society. A Varnashrama society will be a pre-industrial society in which the agriculture will be the main bedrock. Agriculture will be the rock of, how the economy would be run, and the government would have monarchy. The form of government would be monarchy. So, and this is also been mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam classes. There is a reference here. So, as I said, religion being described in Srimad Bhagavatam as laws of God, and Manu Samhita is a law book for entire human society. And Manu was one of the 12 Mahajans. And in Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada also writes that, it's an obligation for the leaders of the society to be well versed with the courts of Manu. quotes of Manu Samhita. And what's and Prabhupada seems to have, all entire his books, lectures, letters been in line with Manu Samhita's laws, in terms of, Manu's attitude and laws, in terms of social and sexual morality, status of women in society, Vedic view of divorce, widow remarriage, dowry laws of inheritance. All these things, Prabhupada seems to be, in line with what Manu Samhita says. But Prabhupada stresses that the purpose of the laws of Manu is to regulate society to a higher purpose of renunciation and devotion to Krishna. And the purpose is to direct all the activities that the mankind is doing, being the Varnashrama Dharma divided into four sects: Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. All these four divisions is to direct the activities of the entire society to the transcendental service of Lord Krishna. But these laws, Prabhupada says, can be superseded if higher principle is involved, like in Manu Samhita and in Vedic traditions, saying that Brahmana cannot travel overseas. Prabhupada traveled overseas. The renunciants and sannyasis cannot travel in cars, cannot have these kind of transportation. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, for preaching purposes, used cars, even wore Western clothings. So for a higher purpose, higher principle, these laws can be superseded. As sannyasis in Manu Samhita says that they can wear deer skin cloth. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saw one of the sannyasis and he recommended not to do that because it involved killing of an animal. And in Manu Samhita also, why it is said that its purpose is to regulate the society so that they can eventually have more renunciation and devotion to Lord Krishna, is that in Manu Samhita there's a mention of eating meat, is to regulate eating meat in such a way that eventually the conditioned soul stops eating meat. And the, Mahatma Gandhi had this view of prohibition of meat eating, and Prabhupada is also mentions in India his interest in for prohibiting meat eating. So these are the few points. Now Manu Samhita mentions Prayaschitta, and we have discussed this in Srimad Bhagavatam discussion before also, that what is the real atonement of the sins that are committed by conditioned soul. So Manu Samhita mentions Prayaschitta, atonement processes. But Prabhupada says the chanting is better than atonement, and by chanting, all the Prayaschitta, all the atonements are done automatically. And there is a mention, Manu Samhita, the caste system. Prabhupada says that the caste are supposed to be given to a person according to the symptoms of what they do. And Prabhupada's understanding was that the status of Vaishnava rests on, being ethical, very rigorous ethical and moral training. That is also mentioned in Manu Samhita. And how can that be achieved? Rigorous moral and ethical training through Varnashrama and regulated devotional service. But Prabhupada gives a hint of egalitarian society, a egalitarian Vaishnava society, that everybody is being seen as servants of Krishna. Some people might, some people approached Prabhupada and asked these questions regarding gender, race. Prabhupada said, yes, if you think you are that body, then automatically you are conditioned by thinking that way. If you see yourself as servants of Krishna, you are all on an equal platform. So, but the keywords for Manu Samhita, all the laws, even mentioning inheritance, dowry, all the social order, there is two purposes, two keywords: devotion to Lord Krishna and renunciation from material objects. And so these were few points that were mentioned in that ISKCON Communication Journal, I think 1998, by Zen Brzezinski. And I thought that was appropriate because in today's two verses we were discussing about dowry and how all of that fits in. So the ultimate goal of following all these laws is increasing transcendental service to Lord Krishna, and these laws are supposed to regulate mankind. So now, discussing these two keywords further, devotion to Lord Krishna and renunciation, I am referencing this book called Das Mula Tattva, The 10 Esoteric Truths of Vedas by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. The 10th chapter in this book is called Pure Devotion, the Only Means of Perfection. So, these two words that I mentioned, devotion to Lord Krishna and renunciation from materialism, will be discussed further. The definition that it says that thus the best of bhakti is to discard any attraction for speculative knowledge and fruitive activities born from materialism. It says favorable devotional service means to serve Krishna with attraction and loving attitude. So, Varnashrama Dharma, all the laws mentioned in Manu Samhita, the higher principle is to regulate the living entities, conditioned mind, and increase the loving attitude towards devotional service. So that also is mentioned here. Favorable devotional service means to serve Krishna with attraction and loving attitude. It is imperative for seekers of bhakti to acquire correct knowledge of eternal relationships between jiva, matter, and the Supreme Lord, and further know their original identity Swarupa as servants of Krishna. So this idea of being everyone on an equal platform, man, woman, old person, young child, everyone on an equal platform, is to see oneself as servants of Krishna. The mood of renunciation, that is the second objective of following the Manu Samhita laws, is the mood of renunciation and abnegation that appears prior to execution of devotional service is in fact also a feature of karma, fruitive activities. However, bhakti in the jiva is distinguished by the symptoms of unmotivated, uninterrupted, natural, favorable attraction of the heart for the service of the Supreme Lord. So, again and again, this thing is stressed that service towards the Supreme Lord, transcendental service towards the Supreme Lord, regulated devotional service towards the Supreme Lord. Even if one continues to diligently execute all limbs of sadhana bhakti, regulated devotional service, one cannot attain prema, love of Godhead, without first achieving deep attachment for Sri Krishna. Devotional service, beginning with hearing and chanting, mitigates material distress and simultaneously produces a sense of good fortune. So, this mentions again that this regulative devotional service is what the purpose of the ISKCON society, that what we are doing is regulated devotional service because we are conditioned by our mind, and how slowly a sadhaka can reach to the stage of love of God at prema starts from regulative devotional service called Vedhi Sadhana Bhakti. And when this devotional service is practiced, then all the immediate material distress that is in mind Rup Goswami says this goes away and a sense of good fortune arises in the heart. Now this passage I was able to relate in terms of modern sense of how people think spirituality is. When it is quoting, I think one of the Rup Goswami's verses, when the senses are engaged to attain the ultimate goal of spontaneous devotional surrender, this is known as sadhana bhakti. The pure devotional tendency of the jiva is eternal and self perfected. However, the process by which this latent attitude is awakened is sadhana, practical devotional service guided by scriptural injunctions. It talks about this tendency of jiva, of spontaneous devotional surrender, this tendency of jiva for seeking Krishna. Uh, when this way, when there was this group formed in 1935 for people having drinking problem, people having a problem of alcohol, and they were trying to develop some kind of ethics, some kind of laws, rules by which to live by, so that they can get rid of their tendency of indulging in drugs. So their book, they mention the phenomena of craving. They are, all of these people who have this drinking problem feel that they have something missing and they don't know what is missing, and they they try to drink it away, but it's not going. They say this craving is not going, and they are not able to describe this craving. So they say this phenomena of craving, this craving is actually God hunger. This is a hunger for God, and only by having a union with God this craving can go away, that they are so much desperately trying to satisfy through drinking of alcohol. So it's something similar, this tendency of the jiva for spontaneous devotional surrender, to have that interaction with Krishna is in every living entity. Says Vedi Bhakti. There are two types of devotional service, regulated devotional service. Vedi Bhakti and Raganuga Bhakti. So, and then here also the principle comes with Prabhupada says that the lower laws can be transcended for a higher principle. It says Vedi Bhakti is symptomized by a quality of devotion that is solely ruled by scriptural injunctions, curbing the natural flow of attraction and taste for Krishna. We cannot do whatever we like. Like, today we want Krishna to be dressed in this certain way, so we dress him in that certain way. Uh, it will not be regulated, it will be disorganized. So Vedi Bhakti is, having everything by scriptural rules and regulations. And this is what all the sadhakas do. But after Vedi Bhakti has been practiced for a long time, it says the regulative principles of Vedi Bhakti are enjoined in scriptures to be followed by four social and religious orders called Varna, Ashrama, Dharma. But the higher principle is Raganuga Bhakti, regulative devotional service inspired by spontaneity of heart without overt compliance to the rules, that is developed in due time. So now this chapter mentions that what is the definition of faith. It's again and again mentioned, how important it is to have faith in Krishna. So what is faith? So Bhakti Vinod Thakur explains that faith is by having this idea that by rendering transcendental loving service to Krishna, one automatically performs all subsidiary activities. This confident, firm faith, favorable to discharge of devotional service, is called Shraddha. That if I engage in devotional service to Krishna, if I engage in devotional service, all the subsidiary activities, all the other activities which I am supposed to perform, which are my duties. The Manu Samhita mentioned our duties of religion, laws of God. If I'm engaging in devotional service of Krishna, all these subsidiary activities are already satisfied. This faith is called Shraddha. Service in service of Krishna is the ultimate goal. And when Shraddha becomes undeviating, one attains the platform of Uttamadhikari, the topmost level of bhakti. One who develops even a little Shraddha, faith in Krishna, automatically finds his inclination towards fruitive activities greatly reducing. But it mentions that chanting in the holy name of Krishna shows our faith. And it says that the chanting of holy name of Krishna with a little faith is called Chaya Namabhas, the shadow of the holy name in the clearing stage of anarthas in our heart. But at the same time, if one is chanting the holy name and nurturing material desires, there is no relationship with Krishna. And the chanting of that sadhaka is on a level of mere reflection of the holy name at the stage of clearing the anarthas of heart. So, if we are starting with faith in Krishna and start chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, at that time our heart is clearing from all the anarthas, all the sinful tendencies that we have. But if we are chanting the holy name with a material goal in mind, this says that we are not able to establish a relationship with Krishna as servants of Krishna. So that does not help us transcend into higher stages of bhakti. Now, yes. Now, I thought this mentioned the Prabhupada's mood in this chapter, where it says Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 14th chapter, 3rd verse. Those who, even while remaining situated in their established social position, throw away the process of speculative knowledge with their body, words, and mind, offer all respects to the description of personality of Godhead and his activities, dedicating their lives to the narrations of the pastimes of Krishna, are liberated by Krishna personally and his pure devotees. These entities certainly conquer Krishna, although Krishna is unconquerable within the three worlds. So, whatever the status of living entity is in the social order, if that living entity rejects all idea of speculative knowledge, that what is good for me, what is bad for me, and surrenders to Krishna and dedicates his life, her life to Krishna, focusing on in the narrations of Krishna's holy name, his pastimes, his activities, that person, that conditioned soul is eligible to conquer Krishna. And again, it's mentioned that our living entity acquires material things, that thinking that these material circumstances, these material objects will save me in our life. But this mentions that the most valuable commodity a living condition, a living entity can have is faith in Krishna. The living entity, after acquiring heaps of devotional credits over many lifetimes, obtains Shraddha, faith in inclination for devotional service. When with this blossoms the devotional attitude, which enables him to interact with matter only for the purpose of keeping body and soul together. Now there was the second aspect of Manu Samhita, these laws, renunciation. So this renunciation can be developed by faith in devotional service. It says, however, this is not that simple. Renunciation, austere dry renunciation, aiming at liberation, which does not cultivate faith, will not last long. So renouncing from material objects without developing faith in devotional service will not last long. But if we have faith in devotional service, so that can save us from greatest dangers. That is a most valuable commodity. Now, Rup Goswami says, as long as the heinous desires for liberation and sense gratification are there in a living entity's heart, which are likened to blood sucking witches that haunts the jiva's heart, there is no possibility of developing pure devotional service. So again and again, it's been mentioned that while chanting the holy name, while performing devotional service, ulterior motives should not be present. If those ulterior motives are present, living entity will never be able to blossom pure devotional service in their heart. Now, now there are different descriptions of bhakti. So Rupa Goswami says in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, when one becomes attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this natural inclination to love is fully absorbed in the thoughts of the Lord. This is called raga, transcendental attachment, and devotional service according to that attachment is called ragatmika, spontaneous devotional service. So, ragatmika bhakti is Vaidhi bhakti is sadhana bhakti, that the regulated devotional service, getting up early, performing Mangla Arti, chanting our rounds, greeting of the deities, attending Srimad Bhagavatam class. This is Vaidhi bhakti, regulated devotional service. By regulative devotional service comes the stage of Raganuga bhakti, in which there is spontaneous love towards Krishna. That comes under the category of Ragatmika bhakti, that means the thoughts are absorbed in Krishna. This Ragatmika bhakti is divided into two parts. Kamanuga bhakti, devotion which is subservient to the promptings of transcendental lust. And second is Sambandhanuga bhakti, devotion based on relationship. That I am a servant of Krishna and I must serve Krishna. But now again there is principle, that which is higher principle, and for higher principle lower things can be transcended. But yes, there is stressed here the importance of Vaidhi bhakti, regulated devotional service. Says here, just as faith and reverence for adhering to scriptural injunctions furnishes the eligibility to practice Vaidhi bhakti, regulative devotional service, so also the intense greed and attraction for the spiritual sentiments of Ragatmika pure devotees provide the eligibility to execute Raganuga Bhakti. So, to develop spontaneous love towards Krishna, the currency, the price we have to pay is called described as transcendental lust, intense greed and attraction to have same symptoms as pure devotees. That I see this pure devotee being completely absorbed in Krishna, I want to have what that person have. And having engaging in Vaidhi Bhakti with intense greed and satisfaction, that's where I want to be. So that is the price that we have to pay. That the only price to have spontaneous devotional service, loving service to Krishna, is intense greed and attraction. And how is that developed? It is Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, if good fortune visits a living entity and he meets a pure devotee who is recipient of Sri Chaitanya's boundless mercy, then that fortunate soul will certainly develop attraction and greed for the spiritual sentiments that embellish the eternal residents of Braja. So, to develop this intense greed and attraction towards this love of Krishna can only happen if a living entity comes under an association of a pure devotee, sees how the pure devotee is talking, acting, all his activities, and this attraction towards pure devotee, this attachment towards pure devotee, develops that greed and attraction towards those sentiments. With the blossoming of spiritual covetousness, lobha, greed for spiritual emotions of the eternal residents of Braja, the devotee immediately liberates himself from inferior tastes such as urge to perform sinful activities, pious deeds, fruitive activities, selfless, unmotivated social duty, and pursuit of empirical knowledge dry renunciation, and so on. So that's why it's a stress to have so much meditation on the pastimes of Krishna in Braja, pastimes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, pastimes of pure devotee. Because Prabhupada says when we are reading Krishna book and we are absorbed in the pastimes of Krishna, we become a part of that pastime. We participate in Krishna's Leela. We become an observer of that Leela. And when and this is out of intense greed, I want to associate with Krishna, I want to associate with pure devotees and engage in their service. Having this greed of associating with Krishna and his pure devotees, the living entity can access those spiritual emotions by being absorbed in the pastimes of Krishna. And when by being absorbed in these pastimes, the living entity liberates himself from inferior tastes such as urges to perform sinful activities. And then there's this importance at the last, the chapter concludes with the necessity of Guru. What's the importance of Guru? It says in Vedhi Bhakti Sadhana, regulated devotional service, according, according to the level of spiritual taste of a living entity, the Guru will give the aspirant the necessary instructions on how to vanquish unwanted desires, anarthas, by following scriptural injunctions. The Guru will guide the Raganuga Bhakti Sadhaka aspirant on the path of rasa, spiritual relish, according to disciples' spiritual tendency. So the Guru is able to see the disciple's spiritual constitutional position. Says taste, ruchi, and greed, lobha, is of two types, temporary and innate. Some devotees, on hearing the characteristics of Sri Nanda Maharaj and Sri Subal, feel rudimentary exhilaration to the point of experiencing the initial stirrings of spiritual sentiments bhava, but these bhavas are temporary. The Guru must analyze the disciple's natural tendency and establish his innate lobha, his greed. The devotee is able to see that what the living disciple, the living entity, conditioned soul is looking for. So the Guru establishes that innate lobha, greed, for once for the four rasas. Dasya means servant, Sakya means friendly relationship with Krishna, Vatsalya means parental affection, and Madhurya, param or conjugal love. Having determined his innate lobha, the Guru schools the disciple with pertinent instructions. For a disciple to do it by himself is a spiritual catastrophe if he is without the shelter of a bona fide Guru. So, all this to say is all the laws of Manu Samhita are there for the living entity, the conditioned soul, to develop devotion towards Lord Krishna and renunciation from materialism. And for the higher principle of seeing ourselves as servants of Krishna, the, the laws that have been established to serve that higher principle can be superseded. And for that, the living entity has to practice regulated devotional service under the guidance of spiritual master. These were some thoughts I had. This is certainly a new topic for me. So referencing that ISKCON Journal's article on Srila Prabhupada's view on Manu Samhita and Western culture and Vedic tradition, I use that as a reference. So if you have any thoughts, I appreciate it.
mean, maybe two things come to mind. One is you're having looked at some of the laws coming from Manu Samhita and drawing attention to the fact that Srila Prabhupada in particular is in line with the laws of Manu Samhita, but at the same time, of course, he's pointing to transcendence. So actually developing some regularity in one's life through devotional service. So it seems that the regularity of life and the moral ethical component is it's almost like a spotlight shines on it when one is giving one's full attention to actually elevate one's consciousness, as opposed to just on a very, I guess, material level, just attempt to follow some laws. So, that was one thought that came to mind, that the laws, have a spotlight almost shone on them, and one has to examine one's behavior, thinking, etc., just by virtue of the fact that one takes to the path of transcendence. So that was one thought.
Yes. And merely following the rules and not knowing the purpose behind it, that why these rules are being followed, will not result in much, will not have much result. As Prabhupada mentions that the caste system in India, mentioned in Manu Samhita, but Prabhupada has said time and again that caste system, this ruined everything, divided the society in different parts and segregated the people with the Shudra and described as lower caste, and how there was animosity between different social sects in society. But Prabhupada says the caste is designated to a living entity by the symptoms of the inclinations of the mind and the activities that person is performing. And all of this is to ultimately develop devotion towards Krishna and renunciation from the idea of materialism. So,
the second thing that came to mind was your seeking into Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's breakdown of devotional service and bhakti and faith, etc., and then coming to the point where there was some distinction being made between the two kinds of devotion. The one being more of a transcendental lust to have the qualities of an elevated personality, and the other being one of just seeing oneself as a servant of Krishna. So that's very interesting, wording it in that way, a distinction between two categories of devotion, because it seems it would have the one almost seems to, the first one of just having seen oneself as a servant of Krishna, no mention of anything apart from that would imply a kind of a very neutral approach. And the other one seems to imply almost a stronger connection to one of the points raised, to a spiritual master, transcendental personality who is actually guiding, and from the reading, who is actually guiding. So it's sort of, I mean, that's sort of what seemed to be the implication from that distinction. So anyway, that was a thought.
Yes. So Vaidhi Bhakti says, it's important for conditioned souls to have this regulative principle. I'm a servant of Krishna. It's my must engage in devotional service. I'm suffering in this world, forgetting Krishna. All these regulative devotional services followed. Second is having that transcendental lust, also being described as greed for those spiritual sentiments, which can which develops, I want what I'm seeing in a pure devotee, and constantly meditating on Krishna's pastimes and the pastimes of pure devotee, the conditioned soul becomes the part of that pastime, and says when we are absorbed so much in the pastimes, then automatically the living entity liberates himself from the inferior tastes of performing sinful activities, pious deeds, fruitive activities, selfless, unmotivated social duties, pursuit of empirical knowledge, dry renunciation, and so on. So, having that greed of advancement in spiritual life seems to be very important in this writing. So, with that, we will end our discussion. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai.